The Republic's Starfighter Corps seemingly couldn't make up its mind on what starfighter model to use during the Clone Wars. It adopted and dropped numerous fighter classes over the course of the war, to the point where only the LAAT/I gunship remained in service consistently for the entire conflict. In particular, the Corps was seemingly indecisive about what model fighter to use as its primary interceptor class. At the start of the war, the Delta VII starfighters favored by the Jedi were adopted for general use, only to be replaced by the V19 Torrent, which in turn was replaced by the Z95 Headhunter. If you're a regular on this channel, you're probably quite familiar with all of these craft, which appeared prominently in Star Wars: The Clone Wars. But you're probably less familiar with the Z95's replacement, the interceptor the Republic finally settled on at the end of the war, the V-Wing starfighter.
Attention, Sergeant on deck!
As we've mentioned in earlier videos, the Republic was always at a heavy disadvantage when it came to starfighter combat. The Confederacy's droid starfighters were simply better than any organic pilots who weren't Anakin Skywalker or Saesee Tiin, as they were capable of executing breakneck maneuvers that would splatter organic pilots against their cockpit chairs. Worse, they always outnumbered clone pilots. Vulture Droids, the Confederacy's primary starfighters, were usually deployed in swarms of over 1,000, while even elite models like the Tri-Fighter were deployed in the hundreds in most battles. The Republic couldn't match or even effectively counter those numbers, they just didn't have enough pilots. The best thing the Republic could do was try to get the best interceptors possible, which would enable outnumbered clone pilots to fight effectively against larger swarms of faster fighters. The Republic contracted Slane and Corporal to build their dream interceptor, and the Verpine company ended up producing the V19 Torrent. The V19 quickly replaced the Delta VII craft that had been deployed as a placeholder beforehand, and it proved effective against the Confederacy's Vulture Droids. But it wasn't effective enough, and when the CIS unleashed its new Tri-Fighters midway through the war, the V19s became easy prey for those fiercely intelligent craft. As a result, the V19 was sidelined in favor of the Z95 Headhunter, but that craft fared little better against the deadly Tri-Fighters. The Republic turned to Kuat Systems Engineering next, and they ultimately produced the Alpha 3 Nimbus-class V-Wing starfighter. Designed by Wallach's Blissex, who would later go on to design the Rebel Alliance's A-Wing starfighter, the V-Wing was loosely based on the Delta VII, which Blissex had also designed previously. But the V-Wing was a huge improvement over its predecessor. It was faster, more maneuverable, more heavily armed, and overall more effective than any interceptor the Republic had ever fielded before. The V-Wing was a very compact and bare-bones craft. It featured no hyperdrive or life support systems, and it could only carry a single clone pilot and an astromech. What's more, due to the compact nature of the fighter, Kuat had to work with Industrial Automaton to produce a new, more compact astromech droid specifically for use with the V-Wing, as conventional models were simply too big to fit. The resultant droids, the Q7 series astromechs, were spherical and floated around on repulsor lifts when not hooked into their ships. Like many of the craft the Republic developed at the end of the Clone Wars, the V-Wing incorporated S-foils, which were deployable flaps that radiated excess heat. Two such panels made up each of the craft's wings, giving it its nickname, while another two at the rear of the craft served as deflector shield heatsinks. These S-foils doubled as landing gear, further streamlining the V-Wing design. The V-Wing's laser cannons were located at the point where these wings connected with the main body of the craft. These guns weren't the most powerful ever featured on a starfighter, but they did their job well enough, as they had a high rate of fire and could effectively track and destroy Vulture Droids. But the most important feature of the V-Wing was its ion drive engines. Predecessors to the infamous twin ion engine system used by the Empire, these powerful propulsion systems allowed V-Wings to fly at speeds of up to 4,800 times the force of gravity in a vacuum. Truly frightening speeds that not even Tri-Fighters were capable of matching. V-wings featured heavy-duty inertial dampeners so that pilots could actually survive flying at these speeds, which gave the craft the additional advantage of being able to execute breakneck turns more safely than other interceptors of the day. This allowed the V-wing to fight separatist craft like the Vulture Droid and Tri-Fighter on more even terms, an absolutely crucial breakthrough for the Republic. Additionally, the V-wing was fairly low maintenance, and it only required one clone pilot. V-wing pilots wore specialized spacesuits that differed slightly from the suits worn by other clone pilots, as they were pressurized and featured fully enclosed helmets to make up for the craft's lack of life support. These last two features meant that V-wings could not only be mass-produced in great numbers, but also be deployed in great numbers. The V-wing first saw deployment at the start of 19 BBY, the last year of the Clone Wars. At first, it was integrated into the RSC in small numbers, as the Republic wanted to be sure of the model before beginning mass production. When the V-wing proved itself to be incredibly effective, it was rushed into production and older interceptor models were quickly phased out in favor of V-wings. The hangars of Venator-class Star Destroyers were rapidly updated to be able to accommodate the new interceptors. And within weeks of the V-wing's premiere, virtually every Venator in the Republic Navy carried a swarm of them. Republic Star Destroyers could carry up to 192 V-wings in their cavernous main hangars, and by the end of the Clone Wars, Star Destroyer captains had begun to rely heavily on the agile craft, despite only having them for a few months. Since V-wings could be deployed quickly and in vast numbers, Republic naval officers began deploying them as soon as their Star Destroyers came out of hyperspace, allowing them to form a defensive screen around the main hangar before separatist fighters could gather for an attack. Once all fighters were deployed, the V-wings would then use the Confederacy's own swarm tactics against them, giving those pesky droid fighters a taste of their own medicine. As an interceptor, the V-wing's primary combat role was to destroy other starfighters, and it excelled at that job. It could outmaneuver even Tri-fighters and Vulture Droids, and it was usually deployed in large enough numbers that the Confederacy's swarm tactics were ineffective against it. It served well in a number of other roles as well. V-wings were frequently deployed as fighter escorts for shuttles or other important craft, and they were also used heavily for planetary defense. Whenever the separatists managed to break through Republic lines during the Outer Rim sieges, they were sure to encounter swarms of V-wings on the other side, which, more often than not, were able to turn aside separatist raids and surgical strikes. The only thing the nimble craft weren't good at was long-range reconnaissance, as V-wings required hyperdrive rings and had a maximum range of 10 hyperspace jumps. However, the Republic had the ARC 170 to fill that role, so that small failing ultimately didn't really matter. The V-wing was a separatist naval officer's worst nightmare. They took everything that made the Confederacy all but unbearable in starfighter engagements and made it all work for the Republic. The superior skill of clone pilots meant that whenever swarms of V-wings went up against swarms of droid fighters, the clones came out on top more often than not, completely eliminating one of the Confederacy's few remaining advantages. We have no doubt that the V-wing played a significant role in the Republic's victories in the Outer Rim sieges. V-wing starfighters served primarily in the last few months of the Outer Rim sieges and the first few months of the Imperial era. This is why we don't see them at all in Star Wars: The Clone Wars. The show almost entirely takes place before then, after all. They fought in many battles during the Outer Rim sieges, with the most notable being the Battle of Coruscant. On Coruscant, swarms of V-wings defended Galactic City against General Grievous's Vulture Droids in the initial stage of the battle, shooting them down before they could complete suicide runs on skyscrapers. When separatist forces fled to orbit at the end of the battle, the V-wings pursued them, and untold thousands of them fought in the last great naval battle of the Clone Wars. As we just mentioned, V-wings were used by the Empire during its early years as well, before they were replaced by CNF Fleet Systems TIE Fighter. The V-wing faded into relative obscurity after that, but its impact remained. Indeed, the TIE Fighter was largely a spiritual descendant of the V-wing, as it was designed to use the same swarm tactics that had made the V-wing so effective. The V-wing also inspired one of the Rebel Alliance's favoured starfighters, the A-wing, which was also a compact, high-speed interceptor. So that's the story of the V-wing. which is probably the most underrated ship in the history of science fiction, if you ask us. But what do you think? Are there other starfighters you'd like us to take a look at and that you think are more underrated than the V-Wing? Let us know in the comment section below. And just before you run off to the suggested videos, guys, make sure you check out our new channel called The Braved, where we dive deep into history and go through all different eras to find some of the most badass individuals and tell their stories in a high quality format there. We post weekly, so make sure you check it out. And if you're just more into music, check out our Relax Shack music channel, where we take the music there and chuck them on the videos here. And if you just want to get access to a behind the scenes Discord where you can chat to myself and the entire team there, and get access to exclusive content, then consider donating to the Patreon. And if you just want to join our wider community, check us out on our main Geetsly's Discord where you can chat to myself and other Star Wars fans, and our Geetsly's Gaming Network, which is almost done, guys, so get hyped for an epic Clone Wars Garry's Mod server. Anyways, guys, as always, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.